Hi, creatives. Welcome to True Creativity Within the podcast. This is my first episode. Doing a podcast is something that I've been wanting to do for some time. But for many of you who know this, or maybe don't know, that there's a lot of production that gets put into doing a podcast, sort of fine-tuning some of the little details, and then trying to get into some rhythm so that you have a podcast that keeps going. So we'll see how this goes. I know for those of you who've been watching my YouTube channel, have seen a few of my YouTube episodes, and I've kind of taken a break from that. And what I'm going to do now is this podcast, which is also going to be videotaped, video recorded, so that you can either watch it or just listen to it. So a couple of things I want to start out with is the reason why I'm doing this podcast is I have all this stuff going on in my head that I want to share with you, especially creatives, that I think is so important for you to know in terms of your creativity, your artistic development, really keeping that art practice going and honoring and respecting that creative part of you. I feel like there's so much insight that I want to share with you that sometimes I can't always share it in one of my class sessions or retreats. I mean, it's what I've been doing in terms of that process is that I love doing my 3-day retreats because it gives me 3 days to be able to give you more information and more practices. But then what happens after that, right? You guys go off and into your lives, and I wanted to give you something that you could continue to listen to, that would continue to support and encourage you through the creative process. What I've learned in terms of my creativity and what I've learned in terms of what I've been teaching is there are so many dimensions and so many layers to creativity. I'm still learning more about it, not only with my own experience with the creative process, but everything that I've learned, I just so get inspired to share with you because it's important information that I think will help you to not only really honor and own the label of artist, creative person, whatever your art is, but that I hope that what I share will just connect or resonate with you wherever you are and wherever stage or phase you are at in your creative development. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast. We'll see how it goes. I want to try to let go of perfection. One of the things I'm learning this year is that I am a perfectionist, and I didn't think I was. I actually thought I was pretty flexible and fluid, and I teach my students, let's go for imperfection versus perfection. But I find that when it comes to my classes, my workshops, and even this podcast or even the YouTube series, I find myself tightening up, wanting it to be perfect. So I'm going to try to let go with this whole new venture. So I hope you guys will sort of ride this interesting journey with me as I try to say, hey, if I have one hair sticking out, or I look a little tired that day, or the lighting is dim, or whatever it is, I'm just going to try to let go of that. So it's going to be interesting because it is also a part of my own growth too, is that it doesn't have to be perfect for you to be creative, right? So in this episode, I thought I would start with episode 1, going through the 10 different faces of creativity. One of the things that I find when I'm talking to some of my students, when I'm in my coaching sessions with individual people or creatives, I'm always talking about the different phases. Sort of, when I say phases, it just didn't quite describe it, but I'm going to use different faces in this episode, which is really, let's talk about, defining that. So the different phases of creativity could be the different stages, the different phases, the different types of creating, different types of art making, different categories or forms of creativity. And that'll become more clear as I go along these 10 different phases of creativity. So I'm going to start with number 1, because I think a lot of people get stuck with number 1, which is creating as a professional career. Because when we think of creativity, or when we think of being an artist or being artistic or creating something creative, we automatically go to what we think or define as artistic or creative. So that really throws us right into, well, I'm not really talented enough. I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to write poetry. I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to sing. Whatever that creative activity is, we automatically go into that, okay? Because I believe that what happens is we start defining a standard, right? Well, I don't understand all that stuff that's up in the art gallery, or, I'm afraid I won't create a masterpiece that all the masters have done over the centuries. And I don't have any art education. I didn't go to art school. I never picked up a brush, or I never picked up a pencil to draw. Whatever that is that gets in the way is often associated with what we perceived out there as the creative professional. Now, the reason why I want to start out creative professional, because I don't want to discount that here. A lot of what I teach is really for individuals to begin to honor their creativity, their artistic tendencies, and to start an art practice. But a lot of this can also be applied to creative professionals. So creative professional is a category where you have decided, this is what I'm going to do as a career. This is what I'm going to do to make money, make an income. I did this. I was a graphic designer. I started out as a fine artist in high school, painting, oil paintings, drawing, traditional. And then I went to art school to become a graphic designer. And maybe in another episode, I'll talk about my whole journey. But, and then became a professional artist, where I actually created a body of work, and I got my art in art galleries and shows, sold my art. So creative professionals, that is where, the category is. Now, if you're a creative professional, this is one face of creativity, that requires discipline and commitment, because this is what you're doing to make money, to establish your career, correct? So it does require discipline. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to have an art education, but you kind of have to really master your craft, master your materials. You spend hours and hours in the studio really mastering your craft. You create a body of work. You complete it. You finalize it. You have it ready for selling, hanging. Whole different thing, right? You're navigating the marketing. You're getting yourself out there, showing your art, making connections with the right people, having buyers, and connecting to galleries or publishing agencies if you're a writer. And then you're also perfecting your art and your craft. So whole other realm. But it is a face of creativity, okay? Now, having said that, you do not have to be a creative professional doing this professionally for you to honor your creativity. So I'm going to go down these different phases so that you can be aware of them. And also, and part of the reasons why I'm going through this is because We tend to think that art making, creativity has to look like this specifically. And it doesn't, because there's so many different facets of creating. So that's why I'm excited about sharing this with you, because this is so important. So the next phase I want to talk about is project-oriented creating. Now, that's, that does also go into creating a body of work if you're going to be selling or if it's a career. But project-oriented could also be, what I have a quilt that I want to create for a gift. That is project-oriented. Or I've always wanted to create a handmade book with handmade papers, with drawings. That is project-oriented. A lot of my workshops, my mixed media workshops, have been project-oriented. Like my illuminated scroll, I show you step by step how to create the panels, how to put them together so that you have something to hang. My other projects, asemic writing, you're learning a technique. It's all project oriented. So that, in other words, there's a goal to complete. You kind of have an idea of what it's going to look like, what the end product is going to look like. But the set intention when you start creating is you want to make a project, or you want to make this end product. So that is one facet of creating. Neither any of these that I'm bringing up are either right or wrong. It's just different ways of creating. Another facet of creating is creating a piece of art from an idea. So you have this thing that's been floating around in your head. Oh, I've always wanted to do this. Or I have an idea of doing this. I want to, I have an idea for a greeting card I want to create. Or I have an idea for something that I want to create for this particular room in my house. So it's an idea that's been floating around, but you've not come around to executing it. So you want to execute this idea. That means getting this idea out of your head and into physical form, into fruition. So you have an idea of where to begin, but you don't really know where that's going to lead. So you have a little bit of an open space for it to evolve or change. A lot of the ideas that I have, I would be floating around, and as I start to execute it, it sort of takes a life of its own. In other words, it becomes something different than what I had envisioned. Sometimes it becomes something more expansive, bigger, or completely 100% different. And but that is just because you began with a seed of an idea or a vision in your head, and you opened yourself up to the process of, I'm going to try to execute that, right? So that's one way of creating. Another way is exploration and experimenting, this is a lot of fun. Again, this one has no end goal or end project or product that you're going for. You're simply approaching this in terms of, I think I'm going to see what happens if I mix this color with this color. Or if I put collage here, or create this texture on this surface and then put collage or paper over it. Or I'm going to integrate embroidering and stitching on this journal page. I wonder what would happen. So exploration and experimenting involves curiosity. You're intending to go into this process with just simply being curious about what happens if. So what you're doing is you're experimenting with different mediums, maybe experimenting with a different approach to how you are going to apply this particular, technique, whether that's acrylic, watercolor, collage, doodling. But you're simply opening yourself to playing, right? You're opening yourself up to discovery. Like, I'm going to discover something interesting. This is where you're welcoming accidents and mistakes to happen, because you want those magical gems of creativity to kind of bloom or sprout up. And those are those little gems that say, oh my God, how did I do that? That is so cool. So that's one facet of creativity. Another facet is learning something entirely new. Like, you have the intention of, I'm going to take a ceramic class because I've never done ceramics. I'm a mixed media artist. I'm a two-dimensional artist. But I think I'm going to play around with three-dimensional and see what happens if I get my hands dirty. So you go and you take a class in something entirely different, a new skill, a new technique, a new medium. Now, this can also be within your medium. Maybe you want to learn how to apply acrylic in different ways, different applications, but using acrylic paints because that's what you use mostly, but you want to expand the different effects and applications. That's also a new skill or technique. You're approaching this particular creative facet with a beginner's mind so that you allow yourself to not know what you're doing. Allow yourself the permission to be clumsy, almost disoriented. You feel kind of sort of like a little kid, right? You don't know how to work this particular medium, but you're learning, and you are giving yourself permission to go through the process of being a complete beginner. So that's one of the facets of creating, is that you're a beginner. You're learning something new. Another one is organizing your creative space or materials. A lot of people don't think this is part of the creative process, but it is. It's so important to realize that creativity shows up in all sorts of places. So, for example, if you say, I'm going to organize my creative space, you begin to discover or rediscover pieces that you maybe threw away, stuck in a drawer in the corner, totally forgot about. You pull them back out and you're like, oh my God, completely forgot about this. This is so cool. I could actually, so you put that aside and you begin to breathe life back into it. You organize your materials and you forget about this whole set of oil pastels that you had, this is my art studio, is I have a lot of materials that I've never used. I'm just keeping it for, I don't know, a rainy day. But then you're realizing, wonder what I could do with that. And maybe I can integrate that with what I'm already doing. Or maybe I'm just going to dedicate this week to even just exploring the capabilities of that particular medium. You forget what you had in your creative space, right? When you are reorganizing a pile of collage material, this is one thing I do is when I'm creating, I just have all these little pieces that I throw into a basket. I don't have the time to reorganize them. I'm putting them in a basket. Well, over time, I forget what they are. And when I look at them, I start to look at them very differently. This is the same thing with looking at old pieces that you thought you didn't like or you were going to throw away, and you start to have a completely fresh perspective on that, on those pieces. But it's the same thing with collage material and your materials. This is one of the things I'm currently doing right now in the 100-day project, is that I'm grabbing that basket of collage material. It's all kinds of stuff. And I'm forcing myself to actually pull those collage pieces into making a project a day, a different collage a day. And it's so interesting because it's like breathing life and new inspiration into a pile that I thought and forgot that I had. So it's almost like a magical experience to renew life into the materials that now have become these mini art pieces that I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. I was able to find this piece, and this piece went with this, and this goes here. And then, so anyway, that is what can happen when you're organizing your creative space or your materials, because you can revive stagnant and creative energy and breathe back life into your space and into your projects. So another facet is researching. Eye candy on the internet can spark up new ideas, can spark up, new inspiration. I find sometimes there's a new technique that I saw on a tutorial on YouTube that I want to try. Doing research is also something to feed back into your creativity. Also remember that whatever you are seeing and looking at gets stored into the back of your mind, and creativity is incubating that for maybe a project further down the line. So allow yourself also time, even though you're not creating with your hands, or you're not writing, or you're not doing active creative process, absorbing information is part of feeding back or is sort of like nurturing your creative spirit and your creativity, and it gets stored to incubating. And trust me, it gets, I used to think, oh, I gotta make sure that I don't forget about this because this was really cool, I want to try it. Well, I also believe and have learned that it will all come back. It'll all come back. It's just being stored away in your creative bank. So that's another way of creating eye candy. Another facet of creating is, this is where I love just diving deeper into what creativity is for well-being. When I talk about well-being, I'm talking about now you're not even creating a project. You are simply doing something creative for the sense of well-being. So you're actually using it either like, very basic, simple art practice that doesn't require skill, that doesn't require thinking or pre-planning or a project, but you're simply using it for de-stressing. You are using it to become more present. And this could be in your art journal, where you are allowed to be messy and imperfect and not to have a plan. This can be an art practice where it is a way to sort of escape from or take a break from a busy life, your routine, or anxiety. If you feel like the world is anxious, or giving you anxiety because there's so much going on in the world, and your nervous system you feel tense or anxious or depressed, you can take a break by simply having an art practice of adding watercolor swatches to a page in your art journal, doodling, and allowing that to be part of your wellness routine. This is something that I believe is very important. I mean, there is so much emphasis on make sure you get enough exercise, make sure you walk, eat right, get enough sleep, relax, get enough time to connect with friends and loved ones. But there's not enough emphasis on your creative time and honoring that creativity in you, because I believe that creativity has so many benefits. So I'll talk more about this as we go down the line, because I believe creativity should be part of your wellness routine. Another facet is creativity reconnects you to your true self. So what do I mean by that? If you were a creative kid, now I believe we are all born creative, but you found yourself more open to doing things that were creative as a kid, and then somehow you lost that. You got disconnected from that as you become an adult. You went to college, you selected a major that you thought was going to fit for you, but it didn't. And slowly you got into a full-time job and a career, a family. You lost sense of your creative self, your true creativity. And this is what I find a lot of my students have done, is that they come back to honoring that creativity in themselves, and they do something artistic. And then it's just reignites something, a sort of connection to, oh, I've always wanted to do this. This is something I've always dreamed of doing, and I never did it. And now I'm giving myself permission to. So creativity reconnects you to your true self. I also believe when we do an art practice that helps us become more present, it connects us to who we are, because it's so easy to be overwhelmed with what our to-do lists, our responsibilities, stuff we're seeing on the media. It's almost like we get so bombarded by all this information, we begin to become disconnected from who we are. Who we are, like what we love to do, what excites our soul, what makes our spirit excited and inspired and feeds us back. That's what I mean by reconnecting to your true self. And then my last facet is connecting to something beyond yourself. And I'm talking about creative spirit, something that feels like a higher power. Now, this is something that I have done over time as I mastered my medium, because I wasn't a trained mixed media artist. I just started playing and I wanted to find out, I wanted to execute ideas that were in my head, and I wanted to see what would happen if I did this. So you can see how a lot of my process was going through those different facets that which I just went over. So what I came to at some point is when I was immersed in the creative process. Now I have slowly let go of the critical voice, the overthinking. And trust me, this is not a one-time thing. I have to go through these stages of letting go of the self-judgment, the self-doubt, the insecurity. I don't know what I'm doing. But when I get to a place where I'm immersed, I let go of all that inner dialogue. I become fully present with the creative process. I let go, and there is a surrendering that happens. And now I feel like I am no longer creating. Something larger than myself is creating through me. And that is really something that I believe through the centuries, many, many artists, many masters have spoken about being led by something much bigger than themselves to create this amazing art piece, sculpture, poem, novel. I believe that exists. And this is something that also taps into our own inner wisdom, our own inner guidance. So for example, in my creative spirit connection group, we use creativity with the intention of gain a deeper self-awareness so that we can grow and transform into who we are meant to become. But we use art and art practice to sort of support that process. So that's just something that I want to end with, because I do believe having a deeper relationship with your creative process leads you to having a deeper relationship with something much bigger than yourself. So those are the facets of creativity. I know there's more of an emphasis on art making because that's my creative focus is mixed media and art. And I want you to think about these things, these different facets, because Creativity is creative energy, and creativity is an ebb and flow. It's not rigid. It's not like you can put it into a box and it operates exactly this way in the way that it's defined. It actually is an ebb and flow. So one day it'll show up in one way and the next day it'll show up in a different way. And we don't want to judge it as right or wrong. Like, okay, today I can't seem to get into the flow. Well, then I will organize my collage material, or I will organize my creative space today. I will make those choices to say that creativity is showing up in a different face today. And this will also, what I'm hoping is that you will allow yourself the fluidity and the flexibility to be in these different facets of creativity, because you'll find that you'll jump around, and that jumping around is okay. It's all part of that creative energy that exists within you. That is all part of your artistic growth. And I want to normalize that and encourage you to give yourself the space to explore each one of those facets. So I hope you found this interesting. If you want to learn more about my workshops, my membership, my Creative Spirit Connection membership, go to truecreativitywithin.com and you'll find a lot of information there. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you get a chance. But I hope you find this very valuable, beneficial, and there's more to come in this podcast. I'm excited because I have a lot that I want to share with you. And one of the things that I do need to do is I need to not want to share it all with you, but that it's okay for me to share little tidbits here and there. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and stay creative. I'll see you next time. Bye.